Before we come to the statement on Defending Democracy Taskforce, I would like to make a related statement. Members will recall that in October 2024, I established a Speakers' Conference to examine the security of members, candidates and elections. That cross-party group published 2 reports, the first in June and the second in October 2025. Together, those reports set out more than 60 recommendations to tackle the serious and the wholly unacceptable levels of abuse and intimidation that was faced by politicians. The scale of the challenge is clear, and no single body can address it alone. The conference, therefore, called for action across government, law enforcement, political parties, traditional and social media, and several other relevant stakeholders. It also recognised members' collective responsibility to lead by example in the way that we treat each other. Responses on both reports have now been published, and I am notified that all members and members' staff of the earlier in the week, and so therefore they should have seen it. I am encouraged by the clear sense of shared purpose and determination to tackle the issues shown by all partners, and I'd like to thank them for their constructive engagement and positive response to the conference's work. Although the conference has concluded its formal work, I remained committed to monitoring progress closely and will continue to press for delivery of its recommendations where necessary. With that, I am pleased to be calling the Security Minister today, who will update the House on the work of Defending Democracy Taskforce, which includes action the Government is taking in support of the Speaker's Conference recommendations. Minister Dan Jarvis.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your statement. And with permission, I will make a statement on the work the Government is leading to defend our democracy and those who serve within it, particularly as we approach the local and devolved elections taking place in May. Now, Mr. Speaker, twice in the last decade, devoted and beloved members of this House have been lost to abhorrent acts of violence. Each time I enter this chamber, my eyes are drawn to the shields dedicated to Joe Cox and to Sir David Amess. They are not simply memorials. They are a daily reminder of the duty we owe to one another and to our democracy to ensure that no one is deterred from public service by fear, intimidation or violence. It is in that spirit that I come to the House today to set out the challenges we face, what this government is doing, and to make clear what we will not tolerate. Now, Mr. Speaker, the work of elected representatives at every level matters. It shapes millions of lives and our country's future. That is why those entrusted to serve must be able to do so without fear or favour. Free debate and honest disagreement are the lifeblood of democracy. But let me be clear, harassment, intimidation, abuse and violence are not political expression. And today, the volume, breadth and tempo of threats against elected representatives is unprecedented. Across this House, colleagues will recognise the grim reality: assaults, vandalism, stalking, blockading, a blizzard of online abuse. This is not theoretical. It affects honourable members, councillors and candidates. It affects our families and our staff. Women and ethnic minority representatives report the highest volumes of abuse, including overtly sexualised and racially charged threats, which has a chilling effect on who feels able to stand for public office. When fear warps debate, when candidates step back, and when fewer people from diverse backgrounds feel able to stand, the damage is deep and lasting. That is why this government treats harassment and intimidation not as an inevitable occupational hazard, but as a serious threat to our democracy itself. Now, I know that you share that stance, Mr. Speaker, and I pay tribute to your leadership, especially through the work of the Speakers' Conference. And our response is rooted in the Defending Democracy Taskforce, which I chair, working across government, law enforcement, Parliament, the Electoral Commission and the intelligence community. The mandate of the Taskforce, renewed by this Prime Minister, is clear: to tackle the full spectrum of threats to our democracy. That means preventing and deterring harassment, ensuring real consequences when it does occur, and providing proportionate, effective security for everyone who participates in our democratic process. This is a year-round task, but the upcoming local elections demand that we intensify our focus and, where necessary, go further. Now, yesterday, I chaired a meeting of the Defending Democracy Taskforce with ministers from the devolved nations. It was a constructive discussion on strengthening our collective security posture ahead of May. We reaffirmed our readiness to support colleagues in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The police are at the forefront of defending democracy efforts, and I thank officers and staff across the country for their dedication and diligence. Ahead of the May elections, we are working with the College of Policing, the National Police Chiefs Council, to strengthen guidance for frontline officers responding to incidents involving elected representatives. It is essential that the consistency of police response is improved across all force areas, and I welcome the police's decision to act on the recommendations of your conference, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm pleased to be able to inform the House today that the Deputy Chief Constable Chris Barmer from Cambridgeshire Police has been appointed to the role as the National Police Chiefs Council lead for defending democracy. And I've written to the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council and to DCC Barmer to stress the importance of their work to democracy itself. I emphasise the importance of keeping pace with the evolving threat abuse poses to democracy, and I will be meeting with them both shortly. Every police force now has a dedicated superintendent coordinator for Operation Bridger, which handles the protection of members beyond the parliamentary estate. Through Operation Ford, elected official advisers at working level exist to support both members of Parliament and locally elected representatives. I have extended the Operation Ford offer to cover all elected representatives across England, Scotland and Wales, supported by a full-time network of 66 Home Office-funded force elected official advisers. I'm also pleased to announce the creation of a new Threat Assessment Centre. This will support Operation Ford by centralising and coordinating intelligence nationally for incidents which target locally elected representatives. This function will be live ahead of the local elections. Now, Mr. Speaker, where the law fails to provide adequate protection, we will strengthen it. We've seen protests deliberately targeted at private homes, timed to intimidate families and children, and designed to exert pressure through fear. That is why the Crime and Policing Bill introduces a new offence to restrict protests outside the homes of public office holders. Peaceful protest is a cherished right, but the doorstep of a private home is not an appropriate setting for it. In addition, the Representation of the People Bill will introduce a new aggravating factor, empowering courts to hand down longer sentences to reflect the seriousness of crimes committed against those who serve our democracy, whether elected representatives, candidates, their staff, campaigners and electoral officials. Now, Mr. Speaker, many members across this House and beyond have faced sustained online abuse and intimidation. Some have questioned whether to stand again. This is simply unacceptable. Through the Online Safety Act, the UK has established one of the strongest online safety frameworks in the world. Services now have clear legal duties to identify, remove and prevent illegal content, including threats, incitement and non-consensual intimate images such as explicit deepfakes. And as we approach the May elections, Government will be engaging directly with major social media platforms to support and inform their election preparedness. Now, Mr. Speaker, countering threats to our democracy is a priority for this government, but I have always believed that this should be a shared endeavour. Therefore, today, I am directly appealing to every member of this House and to colleagues across local government and the devolved governments to play their part. Where we see harassment or intimidation, we must act. Where we experience it, we must report it. I know it can be time-consuming, but reporting really does matter. The Parliamentary Security Department works closely with the Home Office and the police to assess threats and put protections in place, but they can only do so with accurate information. Every report, even if the incident is judged to be below the criminal threshold, helps the authorities to build a clearer picture of the threat. So I urge honourable members, if there is an immediate danger, of course, call 999, reference Operation Bridger and use your SOS fob. For non-emergency incidents, report them via 101 or online, but again, reference Op Bridger and inform your Bridger single point of contact. For Metro Mayors, local councillors and police and crime commissioners, reference Operation Ford, and this will be picked up by the local force elected official advisor. Let me be equally clear about our message to those who threaten, intimidate or harass those participating in our democracy. And this applies to individuals and groups alike. Anonymity is not safety. No one is beyond reach. And whether the offence occurs online or offline, those responsible should expect to be investigated and prosecuted. Now, Mr. Speaker, we must challenge at every turn the notion that abuse, threats and intimidation are now an inevitability for those working in politics and in public life. Across our society, we must never become desensitised to rhetoric about harming those who serve in public life. When we hear it or see it in our communities, it should be challenged, not shrugged off as some new normal. And all of us in this House must also lead by example. Those entrusted with public office set the tone for our national conversation. If we allow abuse to creep into our exchanges, whether here or on the campaign trail, we risk normalising behaviour that undermines democratic debate. By leading with civility, even in moments of sharp disagreement, we demonstrate to the country that principled argument can coexist with mutual respect. Mr. Speaker, I can inform the House that an extensive programme of work is well underway to ensure the security of the local and the devolved nation elections taking place in May. This includes support for returning officers to keep polling stations and count centres secure, alongside expert guidance on personal and cyber security for candidates. Mr. Speaker, history shows us that our democracy is precious. So today, together, we should draw a line declaring with one voice that we will not be deterred from serving the public. We will never tolerate abuse, threats and intimidation. And together, we will confront unacceptable behaviour, hold perpetrators to account and defend our democratic way of life. And in doing so, we honour the words of Joe Cox, who taught us that we have far more in common than that which divides us. I commend the statement to the House.
Can I thank the Minister for the statement and thank him for taking on the recommendations of the conference as well. And I'd like to put on record my thanks for those who served on the conference and for all the effort that was put in. I think this is when the House is at its best. Katie Lamb, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is much to welcome in the Security Minister's statement today. I thank him for advance sight of it and more broadly for his update on the work of the Defending Democracy Taskforce. And I join him in remembering our colleagues who lost their lives in service of the public. As he rightly notes, all of us in this place have a sacred duty to protect and uphold the democracy which has made this country so great for so long. I know few understand this as well as those in the Speaker's office, Mr. Speaker, and all of our Madam Deputy Speakers. So let me take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of all members here for everything you do in public and in private to keep us all safe. Targeted and serious intimidation of democratically elected politicians, particularly where that intimidation escalates into credible physical threats, is a serious impediment to the functioning of our democracy. It is, of course, right that criminal behaviour is prosecuted and punished. At the same time, we have a duty to ensure that policing of genuinely criminal behaviour does not stray into policing of free speech or free expression. In individual cases, this can be a challenging balance to strike. I trust the Minister will approach these cases with the appropriate caution and sensitivity. While many aspects of the Minister's statement are encouraging, I am concerned that other members of this government have failed to approach this issue with the necessary caution or the necessary candour. We must be honest about the fact that, while violence against elected politicians can come from a wide variety of groups, the single biggest extremist threat to our country remains the threat of extremist Islamist violence. That threat is intimately tied up with a growing tendency towards sectarian politics in some parts of our country. As my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, said recently, separatism is on the rise in our country because, for too long, Britain has been complacent about our culture and too tolerant of those weaponising identity politics for their own gain. Yet, in its cohesion strategy published earlier this week, this government seemed unwilling to deal with this threat head-on. The strategy openly acknowledged the existence of communities in the UK living segregated or parallel lives. But rather than dealing with that problem directly, the government proposes a package which may only make this problem worse. More DEI in the public sector, an attempt to smuggle in so-called social engineering under the guise of social cohesion, advisory boards designed to manage tensions when it was exactly this focus on managing community tensions which allowed rape and grooming gangs to operate unchecked for so long in towns and cities across our country, and a new rebranded Islamophobia definition to be issued as guidance to public servants, which will have a chilling effect on their behaviour. This will make it harder to have open public discussions about subjects like female genital mutilation, grooming and rape gangs, and extremism, including any threats it may pose to our democracy. We have already seen that creating conditions in which people fear being branded as racist for keeping the public safe can create horrific outcomes. We must never again allow guidance like this to create a culture of fear which breeds inaction, cover-up or denial. The cohesion strategy is a recipe for further suppression of discussion of the threats that face us today and their root causes. We will not make the truth disappear by discouraging people from talking about it. That has never worked, and it will not work now. So again, I thank the Minister for his statement today and his work on tackling criminality towards elected officials. Can he assure us that his colleagues in government are as committed to dealing with this problem at its root as he himself seems to be?
Minister Jarvis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let me firstly join with the Shadow Minister in expressing our, I'm sure, collective thanks to Mr Speaker, to all of the Deputy Speakers and all of the staff in this House for the important work that they do. It's hugely appreciated, and I know that we are very grateful to it. Let me try and find a point of consensus, difficult though that may be to do given what we've heard. I'd very much wanted to take the opportunity today to do this on a very much a cross-party basis. And in fact, I'd intended and will continue to take the opportunity to thank the work that was done by the previous government. In particular, I want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to my predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Tonbridge, who set up the Defending Democracy Taskforce. It didn't exist before he was the Security Minister. He set it up. It is a very strong legacy for him because he invested a lot in it And I hope that he will see how seriously we take that work. He passed the baton on to me, and I hope that he will see that, having taken the baton gratefully from him, we have sprinted forward with it. I was particularly pleased this week to chair a meeting of the Defending Democracy Taskforce that brought the whole of the system together. That was always his intention, that it would provide that fulcrum point to bring together the different constituent parts of government and law enforcement and the Electoral Commission to provide, if you like, a single version of the truth and make sure that we are properly resourcing all of those who work to keep us safe. I think and I hope that he will be proud of the work that the task force is doing. He understands it's not just about periods of electoral activity. This is activity that takes place the whole year round. He knows how seriously I take it, and I was really grateful the other day to be reminded of the work that he'd done in terms of getting us to where we are now. And I hope that he will be pleased to acknowledge the progress that we've made in recent times, which I referenced in my introductory remarks. Not least, the government has introduced new legislation. It's important to bring forward legislation where it's required, which will restrict the protest outside the homes of public office holders. I don't think anyone really thinks that it is appropriate that MPs and their families should be targeted at home, and we are taking legislative action to prevent that from happening. The relationship, as the Right Honourable Gentleman will know, with the police is a very important one, and we work very closely with them to ensure that they've got the appropriate guidance that they need, particularly for police officers on the front line when responding to incidents involving elected representatives. And I'm particularly pleased to be joined on the front bench by the Minister for Democracy. She has other responsibilities, but that's a very important part of her remit. I'm really grateful to her for the important work that she has been doing in terms of the representation of the People Bill, which will introduce new measures to create a very powerful deterrent for those who would seek to intimidate those who serve in our democracy. Now, the Shadow Minister opposite, she did raise a point about policing priorities, and I understand why she would seek to raise that particular point. She will understand, not least from her time previously working in the Home Office, that the police are operationally independent, but it is important that we work closely with the police. That's why I particularly took the opportunity this morning to welcome the appointment of a new national lead for defending democracy. This is someone that I intend to work very closely with, and I think will provide an important focus for policing activity around the country. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am very sorry that the Honourable Lady opposite then chose to segue into matters that were not within the scope of this statement. I'm genuinely so sorry that she decided to do so, because, not least, I'd given the front bench opposite ample warning of my intention to come forward and bring a statement to this House today. I did so on the clear understanding that this is something around which we can unite as a House, that on this, of all occasions, as we stand and sit in the shadow of the shields, if we can't cooperate on this, then what can we cooperate? So I hope the Honourable Lady will reflect on her comments.
Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope the Shadow Minister will get to her feet and correct the record, because there's a far greater threat from the far right than there is from Islam. And, you know, in this holy month of Ramadan, I'm sure Muslims all over the country will be praying for her soul, whether she deserves it or not. Madam Deputy Speaker, I sit on the Speaker's Commission on AI, which is chaired quite expertly by yourself. And every month I put a block of the month on my social media. The threats to our safety is getting worse. A small number of tech firms are deciding what a large number of people see here on their social media platforms with very little oversight or accountability. 8 people basically deciding what 8 billion people see. It is time, and I hope the Minister would agree with me, it's time. We can't put guardrails around the AI industry. It's moving too quickly. So we need to put guardrails around the human beings. We need to make sure that our rights are protected, our voice, our image, and what we do is protected. So we need to focus on guardrails around the human. And I do hope that the Minister will consider my human rights bill that I am proposing very shortly.
Minister Jarvis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, not least for the work that she does on the Speaker's Commission, and she's right to raise the concerns in the way that she has. I know that she will understand that there's a very important role for DCIT in terms of these matters. These are things that we discuss in the forum of the Defending Democracy Taskforce on a very regular basis, but she's right to raise her concerns, and I know that they will be widely shared around this House. But perhaps I might just say one other thing to my honourable friend, because I am in awe of the courage that she and other honourable members brings to their public service in the face of extremely unpleasant abuse that she and other honourable members have to tolerate on a very regular basis, that she continues to step forward to represent her constituents and her country in the way that she does is greatly to her credit.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Speaker's office for all that the Speaker and the Madam Deputy Speakers are doing on this issue. I must say I was somewhat taken aback by the Shadow Minister's approach to this, and I'll try to be constructive, but where I do veer away, I hope the Minister will take the points. The Minister is right to highlight the importance of protecting politicians at every level of our democracy. We must ensure that the horror of what happened to Joe Cox and Sir David Amess never happens again, and that representatives at every level feel secure when they're discharging their democratic duties. Many members have received death threats and harassment and feared for their families, particularly women and those from minority backgrounds. Having experienced threats myself, not from radical Islamists but from right-wing extremists, I know how important these protections are. I also remember, as the Cheltenham MP, the bravery of Andrew Pennington, who died defending my late friend Nigel Jones in an attack on the Cheltenham Liberal Democrat office. I welcome the steps that the Minister is taking to ensure that the elections in May are free and fair. Our democracy is precious, and it must be carefully protected by those in power. To that end, we welcome the existence of the Taskforce and the work that it is doing. We do worry, however, that the Taskforce is perhaps not working fast enough to address the threat of foreign interference in our democracy. Hostile states are increasingly using social and traditional media to spread disinformation, to undermine democracy and our elections. So what steps are ministers taking to tackle that threat? As the Member of Parliament for Cheltenham, home to GCHQ, I know the vital work our intelligence agencies do to counter those threats, but that must be matched by political leadership from this House as well. We will all remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, with disgust, the case of Nathan Gill, the Reform politician convicted of working for the Russian government, which received remarkably little attention. Yet it shows the very real threat to our democracy from within. We are all scarred also by the revelations that there were agents of the Chinese Communist Party working in this House for honourable members, and we were outraged, rightly, that Peter Mandelson shared market-sensitive information with Epstein, among many elements of disgraceful conduct that poses a threat to our democracy. So is it not now time for a dedicated crime and corruption unit in Whitehall? And would the Minister agree with me that it is time for legislation to ensure all electoral candidates declare any donations or gifts from Russia? Does he also agree with me that it's time that rules are introduced around donations made to political parties via cryptocurrencies? This method obscures the source of donations, and this loophole must be closed before it is exploited more widely to the detriment of our democracy. We will all have noted the recent endorsement of crypto by the leader of the Reform Party, the member for Clacton, who does so, Madam Deputy Speaker, while maintaining, and I quote, that he does not do computers. There is much work to be done to protect our democracy, and the Minister and the Government has our support to speed that up, because there is nothing more important than we can do in this House than protect those values.
Minister Jarvis.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to him for the constructive nature of his tone this morning. I'm also very concerned to hear about the threats that he has faced, and he knows that I'll be very keen to work closely with him if there's any further support that he thinks that is required. And I also join with him in remembering his lost colleague. He's right to raise the important work that his constituents do in his constituency of Cheltenham, and he knows that I'm a huge supporter and a fairly regular visitor to meet with them, and he's right to raise concerns about foreign interference. He will know, and I'm pretty certain that his party have provided a submission to the Rycroft review, that the government commissioned Philip Rycroft to do an independent piece of work to look at the nature of interference in our democracy. I know that Mr Rycroft is finishing his work and will report to ministers in the near future. and will do so in a way that will allow MHCLG to incorporate any of the recommendations that they think is appropriate into forthcoming legislation. He cited a number of particularly egregious examples of interference in our democracy, and he made a number of what I think are entirely reasonable and helpful suggestions. I hope he knows that my door, and I'm sure the door of my fellow minister, is always open to him should he wish to discuss these matters further.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I should mention that I'm a member of the Speaker's Committee on the Electoral Commission, where we work very collegiately, cross-party, in support of that important work. I thank the Minister for his statement today, and like the women who encouraged me, I aim to support any young women, particularly those from Black and Asian minority backgrounds in my constituency, to put themselves forward to represent their communities in local government. But unfortunately, the increased harassment, abuse and intimidation of councillors and candidates we've seen, particularly in recent years, has been a huge deterrent. So does the Minister agree with me that it's vital we increase the support and protection to all those putting themselves forward, but particularly women, to encourage women from all backgrounds to step forward and represent their communities?
Well, I'm very grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, to my honourable friend for the important work that she does on the Electoral Commission panel and for the points that she has raised. She's absolutely right about the threat that women elected representatives and candidates face around the country. I hope that she sees the determination of the government to work with her and colleagues across this House to make sure that we're putting the protections and the support in place that are required. That was specifically why I referenced the creation of the new threat assessment, which will provide a greater granularity around operational intelligence that we think will deliver real benefits at a local level. She's absolutely right to highlight the concern about the threats, intimidation and harassment, both online and in person, of those participating in public life, and there are some particularly egregious examples of that in recent times. We've got to do everything that we possibly can to support those women who want to step forward, and I'm particularly concerned of the chilling effect that some of these threats and intimidation have on extremely talented women who might want to step forward in public life, but will look at the circumstances that they might have to deal with and think, well, why would I want to expose myself to that? We should all collectively be very concerned about that, and collectively we should redouble our efforts to stand against it. And that is precisely why I made the point, hopefully as clearly as I did, that wherever we encounter this kind of activity, we must report it.
My neighbour, Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by thanking my honourable friend for his kind words at the beginning, and may I also extend praise to Lord Case, who as Cabinet Secretary was so important in setting this up. He's absolutely right to, of course, have mentioned Jo Cox and Sir David Amess, both of whom at various different points were in my mind when this was set up, and I am indeed extremely impressed with what he's done in taking forward the Defending Democracy Taskforce. May I perhaps unfairly challenge him, however, to go a little further and to answer some of the questions that I didn't answer when I was in his place, but I hope that he may be able to answer now that things have progressed a bit. And that's really to do with foreign influence. When we're looking today at what China has done in our democracy, and I don't just mean in this House, but I mean online, when we're seeing the threats that organisations like TikTok bring in terms of disinformation and the way in which they actively promote or demote stories that promote division, we can see that the nature of the threat has changed. And this is really a question about influence. Now, yesterday I had the good fortune of meeting the Director General of Taiwan's Ministry of Justice Intelligence Bureau, who is he knows I was the first Cabinet Minister to meet a Cabinet Minister from Taiwan in a non-trade capacity. They have a lot to teach us about the way in which China plays in our democracy and tries to influence it. Has he looked or has he considered any of that yet? And the second area I would be interested in his thoughts. Again, an area that I didn't get to, I would have liked to have got to, but I didn't get to when I was in his position, which is on the protection of journalists. Because while it is of course important to protect the freedom of elected members at whatever organisation, whether council or national, in which they speak, it is also important to protect journalists in their freedom to speak. Now, I was made aware only recently of a very unpleasant threat against Konstantin Kisin relating the attack on Charlie Kirk, who was murdered only a few months ago. Now, this happened to come from a left-wing extremist, but as we know, there are extremists of various different colour and creed in our community, various different political opinion. So has he looked at how protecting journalists may be able to be brought into the Defending Democracy Taskforce?
Mr Jarvis.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me extend my thanks to him again for the work that he did, and he's right to raise the important contribution that was made by the then Cabinet Secretary, now Lord Case, in terms of setting the Defending Democracy Task Force up in the first place. I genuinely welcome the points that he has made. He's been very good about providing helpful bits of information and intelligence over the past 18 months or so, and I always really appreciate that because it's well meant and well received. I understand why he raises the particular concerns about China, which have been very well debated across this House. I believe that he does understand how seriously I take those threats. There is a huge amount of activity taking place across government. For reasons that he will know very well, we don't often get into the detail of all of that. But I hope that he will understand that that activity is underway. And a crucial part of that is, as he described, working with our allies. And we do that on a very, very regular basis. He's right to raise the important role that journalists play. He will remember from his time in the Home Office and working with colleagues across government that a lot of resource and a lot of time is invested in our protective security regime. We don't tend to say much about it, but I give him an assurance of the seriousness with which we take these issues, and I agree with him about the importance of free speech and the role that journalists have to play. It's completely unacceptable that anyone in this country should be intimidated by any foreign power, and this government will always stand against that activity.
Lola McAvoy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to put on record my personal thanks to the Minister for the support that he's given many members of this House, including myself, as newly elected members, and welcome a newly elected female member to the House today. Would the Minister elaborate a little bit on the Defending Democracy Task Force and any focus or any time that was spent looking into the algorithms that reward rage baiting and extremist opinions? Because I feel that it is degrading our public debate outside this place and inside it.
Minister.
Well, I'm very grateful to her. She's a great constituency MP, and it's profoundly concerning to me, and I'm sure to other members who've been in this place for a number of years now, to hear about some of the threats, the harassment, the intimidation that newer members have had to face in recent time. It's completely unacceptable, and I pay tribute to their resilience in terms of standing against it, but we want to work very closely with them to make sure that they feel properly supported in that. She's right to raise concerns about algorithms. I can give her an assurance that that is a subject that has been discussed on a number of occasions within the Defending Democracy Task Force. I know that she will understand that DCIT are the lead department for that activity. But I heard someone make the comparison the other day that in days gone by, people would go into a library and they would choose the book that they want to read. Now online, often people's content is being directed by forces way beyond their control. I think we should all be very concerned about that. Certainly I am, and it's a matter that I work very closely with colleagues in DCIT on.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement this afternoon and entirely concur with the domestic elements of protecting our democracy he announced. But if I can return to the issue of foreign influence, of course, those countries that seek our democracy harm do not recognise the value of democracy themselves. My right honourable friend has mentioned China. We have debated at length in this House Russia, and the Minister was in his place yesterday when I questioned the Home Secretary on the influence of Iran in this country, with a lot of fears and reporting of shell companies being used, proxies being used to operate within our own shores, including the IRGC themselves. Given the heightened tensions in the Middle East at the moment focused around that Iranian regime, can I ask the Minister to ensure that all loopholes are being closed down to stop the influence of that Iranian regime, where no matter what different views are on the war, I think the whole House can condemn the Iranian regime itself to ensure they are not able to influence our democracy.
Ms Jarvis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the honourable member makes some really good and important points. And it also provides me with an opportunity to pay tribute to the extraordinary work conducted by our intelligence services and by counter-terrorism police. By very nature of the work that they do, it's almost always in the shadows. and often they don't get the praise that I think that they deserve. There are some extraordinary people, quite literally working around the clock to keep our country safe, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. He's right to raise concerns about the current situation in the Middle East, and he's right to ask questions about what the government's response is to it. I know that there is often a temptation to reach for the prescription tool, and sometimes that is the right response. We talk a lot in government about toolkits. There is quite a lot in our toolkit, and I give him and the House an assurance that I will use everything that is in the toolkit to stand against the threats that we face.
Luke Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard today from members across the House about two twin evils that are driving online abuse, one being the algorithms of social media giants which are promoting content which makes people feel angry and makes people feel afraid, and the other is the influence of hostile states who deliberately sow disinformation designed to undermine our democracies. I've heard the Minister say that this is DSIT's role primarily to deal with, but please will he ensure that ministers keep all of us updated on the work that is going on to address this, because unless we all work together across parties and across departments, then this issue will continue to proliferate and there will not be a democracy for us to defend.
Mr Jarvis.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise the point in the way that he does. And whilst, of course, there is an important role for DSIT, I can give him an assurance that lots of other government departments are actively involved in that work as well, including the Foreign Office, the Home Office, the Cabinet Office and other government departments. He's right to raise concerns, but I give him an assurance that we're doing everything that we possibly can to stand against those particular threats.
Ben Maguire.
Can I just thank the Minister for his statement, and it stood in very stark contrast to the statement from the opposition, which was chilling. I thank the Minister for that statement. Many members have already referenced the horrific online abuse which we see on a daily basis, and that online abuse often originates, as has been said already, from foreign states. What steps is the Minister and the Taskforce taking to protect our democracy from foreign interference, which is often subversive, especially following the recent arrests on allegations of spying for China?
Mr Jarvis.
Well, I'm grateful to him for the approach that he's taken. I can give him an assurance that through the Defending Democracy Taskforce and working with the intelligence services and with counter-terrorism police and law enforcement more generally, we're doing everything that we possibly can to stand against the nature of the threats that he described. The world is a dangerous, challenging place at the moment, and there are a range of different state actors who will take every opportunity to sow mis- and disinformation and undermine the basis of our democracy. That is a very important role for government to stand against all of that. But I also think there's a really important role for this House, and that is why I've approached this statement in the way that I have. I want to work with members right across the political divide, and I'm grateful to him for the support of that approach.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first just put on the record my sincere thanks to the Minister for reaching out after the incident that occurred in Blackpool with me a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, since becoming a member of this House, I've received a barrage of constant threats and death threats from the far right in my constituency, and that seems to be growing, which is a real concern. So I know from my discussions with the Minister how seriously he takes the security of members of this House and also those councillors that serve in our town halls. So can he outline to the House how we can support him in defending our democracy in the right way, which unfortunately is in stark contrast to what we heard from the party opposite in their statement today?
Mr Jarvis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to him. He knows I was very concerned to hear about the incident that happened recently. I can say to him and to the House that under those very difficult circumstances, he did exactly the right thing. But he was dealing with a situation that he should not have had to deal with. And that's why it's incredibly important that we make sure that our response is as organised and resourced as it needs to be. He specifically asked the question about what we can collectively do, what more can we do together as parliamentarians. My response to that is to echo the remarks that I made earlier, which is to report it. I know that we're all busy people, our staff are busy, but we mustn't let anything slide. We must take every opportunity, even if it falls below a legal threshold, to report matters to the police. we can use.
Councillor Blackburn.
It was an honour to serve on the Speakers' Conference, and I've tried to, in all of the work that I've done around security, be a voice for the smaller parties, and particularly for people that are further away from Parliament as well. One of the biggest strengths of the Speakers' Conference was the amount of listening it did to members and members' experiences. I appreciate the huge amount of work that's been done to improve the data gathering and the fact that we're much better at pulling together understanding on threat. But would the Minister give us a reassurance that members' experiences will be listened to in addition to just looking at the data, so that we can build on those strengths that we had during the Speakers' Conference?
Let me just quickly say that I had a very constructive meeting with colleagues from the Scottish Government yesterday, and I appreciate their attendance at the meeting. She's absolutely right to raise concerns about experiences, and that is why I will always make myself available to speak to any member of this House about what's happened to them.
Speaker, much of the intimidation candidates now face doesn't come on the doorstep, but from anonymous or fake online accounts. Having experienced that myself, I welcome the work of this government, the police, the Defending Democracy Taskforce and the Office of Mr and Madam Deputy Speakers. I'd like to ask the Minister what action is being taken to stop online anonymity being used as a shield for harassment and intimidation in our democracy, and how will candidates in Portsmouth's May election receive advice, support, protection and the enforcement they need to stand safely for public office?
Right to raise the concerns in the way that she has. Hopefully she will have heard my earlier remarks, which specifically respond to the point that she's made. We're working very closely with law enforcement, and there is work underway to work more closely with the tech companies as well, to make sure that we've got all of the right protections in place for the elections. But if there's more she thinks that we should be doing, I'd be very grateful to discuss it with her.
Madam Llefarydd, and I welcome the statement from the Minister and everybody's commitment in the House to keep us all as safe as possible. The Secretary of State just a few months ago called the case of Russian interference within Reform Party a stain on our democracy. And since then, of course, we've had members linked to Welsh Labour Party are being investigated for their connections with the Chinese state. With the Senedd Cymru election just a mere 2 months away, what assurances can the Minister give me that this task force will help defend our elections in Wales from foreign influence and interference?
And give her the assurance that she seeks. And I'm grateful to Welsh colleagues for their attendance at the Defending Democracy Taskforce yesterday. She's right to raise the threats and the challenges that we face. We are making sure that our response to them is proportionate.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to hear about the Minister's positive dialogue with Scottish ministers ahead of the vital elections in May. On the issue of the collective responsibility of political parties to fair and to safe debate, will you agree there should be no repeat of the racist advert published by Reform last year attacking Anas Sarwar for the heritage of his family, which was widely published and seen hundreds of thousands of times on social media?
Well, I do agree with him, and I can tell him that myself, or the Director General of MI5 and myself, met with the Chief Executives of political parties just recently to discuss these matters.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in 2019 I was physically attacked, or at least an attempt was made to physically attack me during the 2019 general election when a beer glass was thrown at my head. I recognise how intimidating that was, but that was nothing to the experience of those who are commemorated on the walls of this House, or indeed many of the women who sit in this chamber. Less than 12 hours ago, I'm very sorry to say, the Conservative Party put out social media posts that placed the Prime Minister's face on the body of a slug, shameful, or a worm, shameful, or a snake on a £5 note. And several months ago, the Conservative Party in my area of Surrey Heath put out a tweet about me that suggested that I somehow supported rape gangs because I couldn't support their reasoned amendment to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. Does the Security Minister consider those social media acts to be elevating our politics and conforming to the values that we're speaking about today?
Well, I'm grateful to him, but concerned to hear about what happened to him back in 2019. I think he makes an important and reasonable case. I think the majority of members in this House will agree with him, and it's something that we need to keep a very close eye on.
Samantha Niblett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement, and I'm particularly delighted to read where the law fails to provide adequate protection, we will strengthen it. As someone who had a case thrown out by the CPS of being an MP, I should just have thicker skin. That is welcome news. I have thick skin. But does he share my concerns that we have members of this House who are benefiting from engagement with platforms such as X and taking a significant income and then benefiting from essentially angry engagement, and it's going directly to their pockets?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about what happened to the Honourable Lady. She's right to reference the work that we're doing. We are changing the law to strengthen it in order to provide additional protections for members and for elected representatives. I think she makes a good point and a good challenge, and I know it will have been heard and agreed with around the House.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his statement and thank the Speakers' Conference as well for bringing this forward. It's really important to do so. Minister, the Operation Forward that you referred to on page 2 says that it will cover England, Scotland, Wales. Can I just ask clarification why Northern Ireland? Or maybe there's something else in place, but just to check. Can I also make a comment? Often members and indeed their staff and teams are required during election campaigns to undertake extensive public-facing activities, including constituency events, door-to-door canvassing and campaigning, which can expose them to additional harassment or intimidation. What assessment has been made on the adequacy of security arrangements and guidance to members and their staff during election periods, and what role the Taskforce is playing in coordinating measures to mitigate these risks? Thanks so much.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to him, as I always am, and also grateful to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister from the Northern Ireland Assembly for their attendance at the Taskforce yesterday. The devolved arrangements are slightly different in Northern Ireland with regard to Operation Forward, but I gave an assurance to the meeting yesterday that where there are areas where we can provide additional support to Northern Ireland, then of course we'd be happy to do so.
That is the end of the statement on defending democracy task force. I'll give the front benches a moment or two to shuffle as we start the business of the day.